I don't think that I was necessarily all that resilient or remarkable in that way, which I think is really important to stress, because often when people talk to me about my story, they say, you were so brave or so courageous or so resilient, when the truth is that I don't think I was. And I think that that's a good thing, because it means that everyone can do it. There was nothing particularly remarkable or unique about me or about my story or situation. Everyone can sort of manage and respond to and learn from these challenges which we face in life. It's not just that you have to have some sort of unique sort of precursor in terms of resilience.
Jake Bailey, welcome back to the Marketing for Business podcast.
Good to be back, mate. Am I the first repeat guest, or?
No, you're not. But
okay,
you're the first repeat guest who's actually a second-time author.
Okay, well, there you go. It's a niche category, but I'll take it.
What a book. The Comeback Code, The Power of Resilience when things are going tough, man. Look, as you can see, I've got a bunch of notes in here, and I've got questions to ask. But firstly, congratulations on this book.
Appreciate it, mate. No, it's been the culmination of a hell of a lot of work, to be honest, and sort of four years of concerted effort towards getting it to the point that it is now on the table in front of us. So I'm stoked to have it done.
I think when I went to your book launch, there was you were kind of saying that maybe there was 2 stages of getting the book to go.
Yeah. It's lived a few lives, that's for sure.
Yeah. What was firstly, congratulations. It really is a good book. And it's a very powerful message. And I think, and I'm going to talk about this as we go, about resilience and your thoughts and actually your passion around it, and where that passion came from. Why the Comeback Code though? What is it that you want people to leave when they read this book?
I think for me, and it's funny, I talk to people about this a lot, and I don't know whether it's the way that I perceive things or the lens which I view life through simply because I work in this space, or whether it's actually as integral to everything as I imagine it to be. But for me, everything in life comes back to resilience, right? And if you don't have that ability to sort of pick yourself up when things go wrong, then you don't have the capacity, regardless of how well set up you might be otherwise, to go out and to achieve anything, right? It doesn't matter sort of what you come from, what talents you're endowed with, kind of what you may have going in your favor if you are unable to recover when you trip over at the first hurdle, because it's the linchpin skill in life, right? Everything comes back to your ability to endure, because everyone goes through adversity and challenge and hardship and setback. It's a universal experience.
And to put to that though, some people go through extreme adversities, right? And some people go through what they deem as extreme, but to other people might be very light. So I think it's an interesting lens. And I think as we go through, and I'm going to talk about your story. You really look, when I first interviewed you and we had a great old chat, I didn't know about some of the stuff that you went through. And this book really opened my eyes to, man, this kid is resilient. 52 days was it in a one room, and fighting the urge to not die to some degree, but fighting for you. And fighting for everything that you were standing for at the time, and finding it, and the 4S model that you have in here, I think is a beautiful model that we can share with people in more detail today. And I've got a bunch of things. This is where I want to go to. Let people know a little bit about your story if they don't know. Obviously, diagnosed with cancer October. In your last year at 7th form.
Yeah, it was. Yep. 7th form, year 13. Final year of high school, which is 10 years ago now.
Crazy. And you're a prefect.
Yep.
And you're ready to launch into a brand new world.
Yeah.
And you get told, hey, you got cancer and it's pretty bad.
Yeah. And it was, as you say, it was a very regular, very typical sort of ordinary teenage life up until that point. You know, sport and kind of working relatively hard in studies and just, a regular kind of teenage life. So it was obviously, I suppose, by definition, a pretty unexpected turn of events. It's not something which you'd ever see coming at that stage of life.
No, and crazy to be told how bad it was. What was it called?
Burkitt's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a hell of a mouthful, really. Like it's
even reading it, I was like,
what does that say?
But the worst of the worst, as far as you had to get stripped of everything, really, and they had to put in some pretty. There's a lot of chemo inside you, a lot of things, a lot of I guess medicine to some degree into you to get you going again, and 52 days you spent in that room, right? I think, you like when you look at back now, obviously, you've learned and you've got a passion, and that's what cancer taught you, was your passion for resilience and helping people, have more awareness on their resilience. Were you resilient back then? Like,
I don't think so. I don't think I was a particularly resilient young person. I don't even think I'm particularly resilient now, in all honesty. I just think that, for me, I guess I've been through some pretty regular, average kind of adversity for a young person. The loss of grandparents and parents getting divorced and things like that. Pretty regular, standard kind of adversity. And I guess if anything, that gave me maybe a little bit of an opportunity to begin to try and practice and learn and develop some of those skills around resilience, which probably, put me on a little bit of an advantage going into the cancer, that it wasn't the first time something had sort of upended a part of my life. But I don't think that I was necessarily kind of all that resilient or remarkable in that way, which I think is really important to stress, because often when people talk to me about my story, they say, you were so brave or so courageous or so resilient, when the truth is that I don't think I was. And I think that that's a good thing, because it means that, everyone can do it. There was nothing particularly remarkable or unique about me or about my story or situation. Everyone can sort of manage and respond to and learn from these challenges which we face in life. It's not just that you have to have some sort of unique sort of precursor in terms of resilience. We can all learn and develop these skills, which I think is at the core of the book as well.
And I think that's the point. Like, you have learnt from them, though, how to cope and how to have some mechanisms in place. And I think we'll really deep dive into that. Look, as I said, I've got a bunch of things here. Page 29, this struck me. For me, I happened to stumble across my passion by getting cancer. Seriously, when I read that word, I was like, holy shit, some people never find their passion.
It's quite funny.
And you stumbled across it by getting cancer. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, the biggest thing which came about sort of pre-cancer to post-cancer, or the biggest change that there was within me, and there was many changes throughout that time of all different kinds, but the biggest thing has been that I guess I was forced to learn to become more resilient through that experience. Going through that adversity, going through those tough times, going through that challenge, I guess provided me with some skills or tools or strategies around resilience. And I basically came out of the cancer and realized very quickly that having learnt those had made my life considerably better as a result of that, right? I was a happier person. I enjoyed my life a lot more. My life felt a lot easier. And that was in spite of the fact that realistically, it probably should have felt the opposite. Right? There was a whole bunch of reasons that, life ought to have been harder. For instance, I had this risk of the cancer coming back, hanging over my head for the next 5 years. I had these long-term side effects as a result of the chemotherapy. If you had have looked at the situation,
your legs weren't working at one stage,
exactly. And if you had looked at the situation objectively, because of things like that, you would have expected that life ought to have felt so much worse. Whereas in reality, for me, I was loving it. Like things were considerably better after.
Did you just feel like you had a truer optimism on life like this?
Well, I think... And
I remember you talked last time, you weren't like, I've been given a second chance or anything like that. You were like, you were more matter of fact than that, actually, which kind of struck me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's probably a whole bunch of things which have worked towards me feeling that way, right? There's probably a whole bunch of things which have played into, I guess, why life was better after the cancer than it had been beforehand. But I think at its core, probably the main thing was that I was just more resilient. Like, life was better because I had learned to be better at getting through tough times. And previously, whereas I've been weighed down by, those regular day-to-day kind of adversities, which particularly as a young person, as a teenager, you spend a lot of time grappling with, whether it's bad exam results or not making sports teams you're trialed for, or having fallouts with mates, or being self-conscious or insecure, or worrying about what you're going to do in the future.
So true.
All of these things which I'd carried really heavily pre-cancer. Post-cancer, they weren't gone, but I just had a better framework or lens through which to try and process them. I had some skills or tools to manage them, and because of that, life was better. So that's what set me on this path around resilience. I guess that's why resilience is my passion. That's how I found it through the cancer, and that's why I've ended up, I guess, doing what I do now.
I think it's a good point to make the listener and the viewers realise, though, that coming out of that, you're still only 18. 28 now, but like only 18 still. So you'd gone through all of that and started looking at, okay, what did this teach me, and what did I learn from it, right? Which was pretty. I guess when you look back, like pretty wild to some degree. Like it's,
Yeah, and I think that probably helped me with sort of having that contrast between pre and post cancer. Is that when I left the hospital, when I went back into the world, it was very much back into a normal, regular, average teenage kind of life.
Yeah.
So I had a really consistent sort of before and after to compare and contrast sort of and to see how impactful, I guess, being more resilient had been on my life and well-being.
So good. Look, I've got so many questions. 4 things that you talk about here, though, is this 4S model: slow down, salvage, streamline, and stand alone. And
So
you
stand alongside.
stand alongside. Sorry,
The opposite.
yes, stand alongside. You say here, though, to be clear, it wasn't the cancer itself that gave me any of these things. Cancer doesn't come with a magical handbook of life lessons.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really good. You have to spend some time working through this. So I want to go through them, and then I've got questions in each area of it.
100%.
So let's talk about slow down. You know, that's the 4th S. Number 1. Let's go.
So
Where did that come from?
in all honesty, it came from right at the outset of my diagnosis. Like for me, the idea of slowing down, and for your listeners and those who haven't read the book, I mean, slowing down is basically your ability to take a big problem or a big challenge or a big piece of adversity and break it down into a series of smaller, more manageable, bite-sized pieces, right? Basically take things on your own term so that they feel manageable. And everyone listening to this will have experienced this before, right? You wake up some days and you just say, I don't know how I'm going to get through this day. I don't know how I'm going to get through this whatever you're going through, whatever it may be. I don't know how I'm going to get through this divorce, this redundancy, this loss of a loved one, this breakup. I don't know how I'll get through this. And hopefully the answer is, well, I won't focus on just getting through this. I'll focus on getting through to this weekend, or I'll focus on getting through to catching up with a friend for a coffee this afternoon. And so for me, you know, that came about right at the outset of the cancer. Literally the moment that I was diagnosed, the doctor says to you, hey, you know, you've got 3 months at least of chemotherapy and some pretty gruesome treatment ahead of you. Best case scenario, if that goes brilliantly, you've then got 5 years of the risk of a relapse or the risk of the cancer coming back hanging over your head. You pretty much get told in that moment you've got a very different kind of 5 and a bit years ahead than you would have expected. And for me, I reckon if I had looked at that as one big challenge to get through, you know, beat the cancer or you know, get through the cancer, I don't even know if I would have wanted to have tried.
No.
Like it would have just seemed so massive, so insurmountable, so huge, so impossible.
Well, you talk in the book how you just took it day by day.
Absolutely. And that's what slowing down is, right? It's the ability to just take things on your own terms. Sometimes it's a day at a time. For me, it was very much willfully, deliberately ignoring the fact that, there was going to be more chemotherapy tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. Yeah. But just focusing on getting through today, ignoring the fact that there was more to come.
So now that you're out there and you're speaking and helping people, I read this part of the book and I thought I want to ask him why he said that. So you're in now, and I think it's in Australia. You're in a children's kind of detention center, prison, helping. Not that you're in there, you're in there helping.
I've done my time,
you're in there helping, and you kind of, to some degree, were talking in the book how you'd been felt like to some degree you're in prison 52 days in the same room and that sort of stuff. But when someone asked you, a young fella asked you, a question, and you said, when you look at, he was looking at the struggles, etc., and you told him to slow down.
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah, I guess, like I say, that it's a pretty vague comparison to draw, but I guess there were parallels in terms of his experience of being incarcerated for presumably quite a long time to come. The correctional centre that I was working within was the highest level security they have in Australia. It's basically it's the worst young people that Australia's managed to produce, and so they're usually there for a long time. They've got a long stay ahead of them. A lot of them have been sentenced to be there for longer than they've already been alive so far. Right? You've got 16-year-olds in there who are there for decades to come. And so, what I talked to them about and what I talked to him about was this idea of slowing down, like you say, not focusing on, I don't know, in his case, having another 2 decades maybe of time in there ahead of him, just focusing on getting through to the next more manageable, more approachable milestone. And again, it was a funny environment to work within because I don't particularly have a great deal of sympathy for their circumstances necessarily. But at the end of the day, you've just got to try and take it at face value and meet people where they're at and do the best that you can to help people. And
I think you did by what I can read in the book. Like they probably never had someone that confronting, like as far as what you had been through, and really, show them that there is a way if you just focus on day by day, you could actually probably do something. What else does slow down mean to you? Like I've got a question here that I want to ask, and when it comes to breaking, Because I think a lot of people do get overwhelmed, and this is one of the things. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you the book, because I see more and more people today with technology, with everything going on, social media, this and that, binge watching TVs and stuff. People are just so overwhelmed, and they're getting themselves wound up. So how do people slow down? What are some of the tools inside slow down that they need to be doing?
Yeah, I guess, and it's very individualized, right? And it sort of depends on the person and what allows them to have that space and bit of a gap. But it's about just not allowing yourself to be crushed by the weight of things. And again, like you said, that doesn't just have to be be adversity. This isn't just relevant and applicable to when massive, horrendous things happen or health challenges.
Bad feedback about their social media posts.
Yeah,
So and that can cause overwhelm these days. So
100%.
How do they deal with it? Like, what are some of the things? I know you talked about looking at the worst what are the worst outcomes?
Yep.
And how to really what are we facing? Because I guess my question is that do we overplay some of the stuff that's going on, or do we as humans go, well, that's not really an issue?
Again, it's incredibly variable, right? And it depends a lot on the person and the specific situation or circumstance. But I think we often have this sense as people, and this sort of ties into some of the latter S's as well. But we have this sense of as people that when things are going wrong, it's often very easy to pick up everything, which is a problem. I think that the sense of overwhelm sort of perpetuates and creates further stress and overwhelm. Sometimes when things feel like they're going poorly, it's very easy for everything to feel like it becomes a problem, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's important that we try and lean away from that as much as possible, and that's, as you say, where that perspective piece comes back into things.
Yeah, and focus on what you can control, right? Versus trying to focus on everything. So slow down, salvage. This is good, and the great advice. This is great advice for young people, and I think when you talk to me about it, but I've got a few questions. Salvage. What I guess the essence of this is looking for the good in what you're going through.
Yeah, 100%. So first is slowing down.
How the hell do you do that though? Like you're lying in some. You're so graphic in this book. You're lying in a pool of your own spew.
Yeah,
Literally talking through that. How do you find because I think this is an area where a lot of young people do struggle.
Well, so second is salvaging, as you say, basically your ability to look for and deliberately seek out the good within a negative situation. The ability to try and find the silver linings or the light within the darkness or the good within the bad. And I mean, there's a whole range of examples from my cancer, and I guess when I look back on my time in hospital, it was things like, I feel incredibly sick right now because of this chemotherapy, because of my treatment, but once I've got through this, I'll probably never feel this bad again for the rest of my life. And that's fantastic. That's great. Everything from this point onwards is going to be an improvement. Or, yes, I can't go out and live a normal life like all of my mates are right now, but some of them are coming to visit me later on today, and that's fantastic. That's great.
Yeah, nice.
I've got cancer, but I've been born in a country where I have access to treatment and healthcare in line with what I need in this sort of circumstances. So.
So you talk about looking at the big wins.
Yep.
I think you wrote it here really well here. Like you can divide everything that happens in a given day into 4 categories. Big wins, which are uncommon.
Yes.
Small wins, which are frequent. Big losses, which are uncommon, and small losses, which are frequent. So, obviously people love the big wins, but it's probably better to focus on those small ones, and that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, 100%. And, during that time in hospital, during the time going through treatment, that was very much the case, right? Like when you're in the hospital, when your life has been sort of put on pause, you're not going to get very far if you're sitting around looking for the big wins, right? There's not going to be the great exam results, the sort of things which I would have been thinking about, or getting to go out with mates in the weekend, or, obviously at this time of life, it was an interesting and wide range of different things. But when you are going through a period of adversity, often the things which you'd previously have relied upon to make you feel good, to sort of bring happiness into your life, are often taken away. And so what it comes down to is basically your ability to instead switch towards deliberately looking for and seeking out anything which is positive, anything good within that situation. And in psychology, we talk about this concept of realistic optimism.
Yep.
It's your ability to be realistic about a situation, which often is actually to say, this is shit, like this is appalling.
Yeah.
But in spite of that, to still deliberately choose to be optimistic and look for the good during that time.
Do you think that's important to really own that situation?
I think that it's important to be mindful of the fact that it is a conscious decision and choice.
Yeah. Totally.
And it doesn't mean, again, that you have to try and the objective is not to delude yourself into believing that things are better than they are somehow. You have to remain, you don't want to sort of be off in la land or in denial about how bad the circumstance or situation is, but there is a very deliberate, conscious decision to be made to continue to feed the information which is coming in through this lens of what about this could be good, what about this could be positive, because the reality is often there are many things.
Yes.
And for me, when I look back on the cancer, those are some of the things which come to mind for me. And these days when I'm, something's going wrong or I'm going through a tough time, it's a pretty stark reminder for me to look back and know that even during my lowest points of going through that treatment, there were still things which I could find which I guess were silver linings, which I could take away from that situation.
Like strawberry jam.
Like strawberry jam versus raspberry jam, or raspberry jam versus strawberry jam, which will make a lot more context, will make a lot more sense and be put into context for people when and if they read the book.
I think they will read the book. This one's interesting. The three events here: to survive, to recover, or to thrive. I think like we've got a theme for this year is thrive in 25, to own it, elevate it, and celebrate it. Awesome. So very focused on owning what we're doing in our roles and in the business that we're in, and then looking to elevate that. And so pretty easy to focus on thriving.
Yep.
From my perspective anyway, because I've always focused on how to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Cool. But survive, to get through the event left when you for a lot of people that could be really, really hard right now. And I'm talking about let's talk about the business world right now. Like, people are just surviving in some countries, because things are going on in the global economy, right? And then obviously people want to recover, but also people want to thrive. What was that for you at this time of the book? When you're looking to salvage, how did you look at that in those three areas when you were going through this?
Yeah, I think for me it was a range of things which allowed me to try and, I guess, look ahead to that thriving during that time. And as it talks about in the book as well, we recognize there's a whole bunch of things which go towards, I guess, putting someone into a situation or a set of circumstances where they're more likely to be able to come out the other side of an adverse or traumatic event and to, I guess, be benefited by that, to have the ability to sort of thrive and grow and develop off the back of that. And there's a lot of research and study to try and understand what it is that creates this, post-traumatic growth is what we call it, sort of the inverse of PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, the ability to come away from a traumatic event sort of enhanced or better than beforehand.
I like what they say here, gratitude, heightened sense of gratitude.
Yeah,
I really
100%.
like that.
Yeah, that's, these are a number of things which, I guess, characterize that sense of post-traumatic growth. What we see people coming away positively impacted by the event from. And again, it doesn't mean that it has to be entirely positive through and through. There's heaps of things which have going through the cancer and that experience has improved for me or made better about me. There's also some things I'm sure which it has continually negatively affected me in some various ways as well, or things which are less desirable. But it's about trying to create an outcome which, I guess, on the whole is as desirable as possible. And I think that I've probably been able to do that on the other side of the cancer.
Yeah. Yeah, like even for me, like I lost my mum last year in October, and I was writing some gratitude stuff this morning, and just feeling that sense of gratitude for her, and that like it's real easy to say, that was my mum, but it's still my mum, like in gratitude that I still believe that she's around and doing things and all this sort of stuff, like even though she's passed, but having that gratitude does give you that sense, like
absolutely
that there's, you feel like you're able to thrive a bit more versus just surviving.
And it's incredibly important, that gratitude piece, without a doubt.
Oh man, there's so many good things. This one here, streamline, minimize the fears. There's a great part of the book, and there's a great audio I'm sure it was an audio, but the one you did with Liam, and I was just like, here's a guy who no legs. And now he became, and he's a world-class athlete
Yeah,
and stuff.
yeah.
But being able to minimize fears, I think this is one area too. This is why I think it's such a powerful book for kids, not kids, but teenagers and their parents to read, because fears definitely hold kids back and things that are going on, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's some really cool parts of this book. The fear of the future, the fear of the small stuff, and the fear of other people's opinions. Let's talk about this, the fear of the future, because I think it's a massive one. I spoke at university last year. Kids are freaking out about what's going on. Are they going to have jobs and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
Fear of the future. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so those three fears, and the reason I've made it to the book are, I guess they are basically the universal kind of fears that I've identified working with, young people of all different backgrounds, countries, cultures, walks of life. It seems to be kind of what unites young people today, and certainly three things which I very much relate to from my time growing up as well. Fear of the future, as you say, and as you touch on, this real palpable sense of anxiety and discomfort that a lot of young people are growing up with today around sort of basically what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And there's a whole bunch of things which that comes down to. I guess at the end of the day, for a lot of young people today, we're in this incredibly fortunate position of having more opportunities, more possibilities ahead of us than any other point in history ever before. And instead of that feeling kind of exciting or empowering, it is daunting and terrifying.
And the crazy part thing is, you read some older history books and stuff like that. People then said the same things, right?
Yes,
the world was in the 1920s. The world was this. The world was that.
Growing and expanding. And it's continued to do so. But even when I look back on my grandparents and my parents' generation, the jobs that people went into were, I guess, dictated often by sort of who they were born or where they were born. Dictated by what the family might have been into in terms of business or fields. It was quite a narrow band of opportunities and possibilities available to them. And at the end of the day, it's an incredibly privileged position that I and a lot of young people find ourselves in today. And it's not one that everyone finds themselves in. But for those who do, generally talking to them, I tend to find that they find it quite daunting, quite uncomfortable. And that's I understand that.
Yeah, totally. So fear of the small stuff.
Yep.
I think that's a great one, because I remember reading a book and it just said, don't sweat the small stuff. I decided to go deeper into it, and I realized I was sweating the small stuff.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, some of the small stuff just doesn't matter, right?
No, and it's very easy to do. And I think particularly, as I say, working with young people, this is something which I've seen a lot. And it's something which I did a lot of as well. Like
totally.
I'm not sort of, oh God, I'm not, definitely not trying to imply that I was, above or beyond this in any kind of way. Because I was a big one for this. I was worrying about all of those things I touched on before, the trialing for sports teams and not making the team which I wanted to get into, or bad exam results, or failing tests or assignments, or fallouts with mates, and being left out of things, and who was going to what party and what clothes I was wearing, and the pimples that I had on my face. And there's a lot of things which felt very, very intense and very heavy at the time, which sort of, with the benefit of only maybe 5 years hindsight, start to fall away pretty quickly.
So there's an interesting part in here. Well, it's not that interesting, but it was interesting as far as sweating the small stuff. And I know this is quite a touching subject, but I want to talk about the mug. And I think this is a reason why people should read this book. But you've got a favorite mug, and let's not spoil the story.
No.
But this was a good example of not sweating the small stuff, when you realize what this other young person had gone through, right? And I think it was pretty cool that the mum sent you this mug. It's got a heart of gold on it. Right? I really enjoyed that story. We're not going to talk too much more about that, because I think people should, if you really don't want to sweat the small stuff in your life, you should go and start reading page 125, because it's a freaking epic kind of insight into having that gratefulness mindset and where people should be in their lives. The one I think is also most important, and this is I teach my son. I actually teach my son one thing: life rewards effort. Okay, and I was constantly talking to him about how life rewards effort. But a part of that is when you, and this gets a lot of young people, fear of other people's opinions.
Yes.
And look, one other thing I teach my son: what anyone else ever thinks of you is none of your business.
No.
Right? And man, when I heard that, I feel really grateful to hear that. I didn't hear it till I was probably about 17, but when I heard it, I got it.
Yeah, sure.
And I think this is a big thing that you and Liam talk about, and what other people think. Young people do get caught up in that today, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So talk to them about that.
Yeah, so I guess this whole thing about other people's opinions, that's a universal experience, right? I mean, that experience of growing up as a teenager and being insecure or self-conscious or fretting, what other people think of you or how other people view you, I think is a universal experience. It definitely was a big part of my time growing up as a young person, that's for sure.
Even more so now with social media. I remember talking to a couple of young girls, friends of ours from the family group, and they actually said to me, Scott, if we could, we'd get rid of social media because we have to worry about what all of our other friends think about us all the time.
Eh?
Even to the point where, they wanted to tell me that. I don't know if they wanted to tell their friends that, but they're all starting to think like that because,
Yes. I saw a study that came out of the UK about 10 days ago, and it showed that 67% of teenagers, and that's across the full age span of teenagers, 67% of them think that under 16s should be banned from social media.
Yeah.
And given that many of them are still under that age, I think what that probably reflects isn't so much that they're actually concerned about, I guess, the impacts on brain development of social media and technology or anything like that. It's just that it's a collective action problem, right? Where if your friends are on it, you have to be on it or you're the odd one out. Whereas they recognize that if no one was on it or if they didn't have to be on it, then they would sort of not have to worry about that. It would be an element or a component of life which they could have taken away and a weight which would be lifted off them. So I think you'll find that most young people do feel that way. Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly how these girls feel. They felt if we didn't have to be on there, if we didn't have to reply, and we didn't have to worry what other people were thinking, life would be a lot easier. And I remember how it was. We didn't have any of that back in the day. You still had the whole, schoolroom, school ground stuff going on, but
when you got home, it was you're away from
it, right? Hey, so one of the cool things I like when you're talking about, streamlining and minimizing the fears is having your actual own personal values. And I think this is a part of the book where people could get a lot from a learning aspect, okay? Because I don't believe, and I think we did talk about this last time, a lot of people don't actually know what they stand for.
Yeah, sure.
They haven't actually done the work to go, well, actually, what are my values? What do I believe?
Yeah, it's interesting, eh? It's something which gets thrown around a lot. I think as a society, we've pretty much killed this idea of values because the only exposure we really have to them is, I guess, when you're a young person, you get, school values, which, make no mistake, is just a list of rules or expectations. It's just the school telling you what they want from you. Your parents, maybe growing up, might talk about family values. And again, that's really just another set of expectations or rules that they place upon you.
Yeah.
And the only other time we really talk about values is often in a kind of a combative role, as it says in the book. It's the first thing we jump on to criticize or attack a business or a person or a company or an organization when we don't like what they're doing or what they're saying is we challenge them on their values. So values have become incredibly boring, I guess, in our society, sort of simultaneously controversial and boring, I suppose. But in reality, values are really just what makes us who we are as individuals. It's what dictates everything you think, feel, do. Every decision that you make is driven by underlying personal values.
Yeah.
And so it is really important to stop and sort of take time to evaluate and go through a process of trying to understand what your values are.
What you stand
because
for.
it basically just gives you a better chance to understand sort of what it is that makes you tick and why you are who you are as a person.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can be as simple as one core value I have is, formal education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a fortune.
Yeah.
And I heard it and I realized the key to being more successful in life and whatever I want to do is to stand on the shoulders of other people, giants who understand things like resilience and how to break down that code, how to go and learn from someone that I want to go and, so I'll go and that's just a value that I have. I value education. I didn't value it at school at all. Don't know why, but I just didn't resonate with it. Got out of school, started reading books. Oh my God, you can learn, do and be anything you want in life. And I think even if you just, you've got a whole bunch of values broken down in this book, and I think in chapter 7, you can actually spend some time just going through that as a person, and like I think if you just come up with one or two that you stand for, I think life. You can get a few more choices back in your own life. You can take a bit more control in your own life. So I think that part of the book in chapter 7 is very, very usable for a lot of people.
It's massive, and as it will inevitably say in chapter 7 there, I'm sure I would have written it. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but I'm sure it does. The best basically predictor we've identified for whether someone has a high level of well-being or a low level of well-being in life, whether someone's happy or sad over the course of their lifetime, is the question, do you live your life in accordance with your values?
Yeah.
And that has a stronger correlation with a high level of happiness and well-being, if you answer yes to that, than any other question we've been able to find. From, how much money do you make? How many friends and family do you have? Were you born in a first or third world country? Have you had a good life or a bad life? Do you have health challenges? Are you healthy? All of those questions, whilst there's a strong correlation for many of those to happiness and well-being, the strongest predictor we have found of well-being in people is the question, do you live your life in accordance with your values? But you're pretty hard-pressed to answer yes to that question if you don't know what your values are.
Yeah.
So it's really important, I think, for people to gain an understanding around that.
Yeah. And how many values do you think people should have?
I think a good understanding of your top 5 is pretty core. It's great. Your broader 15 will probably shift and adjust over the course of your lifetime. Your top 5 will typically remain relatively set.
Nice.
We tend to see from research that by the time that you are 7, your values are largely set in stone. They'll be the same when you're 17 and the same when you're 70. That top 5 generally doesn't shift. The broader 15, there's sort of some adjustments over different phases and stages of life. You can break it up into sort of broadly blocks of 30 years, 0 to 30. People have values sort of centered around hedonism and the pursuit of pleasure. People sort of have values around excitement or fun or adventure. 30 to 60, the middle block, people tend to have values around sort of progress and establishing themselves, whether it's career development or personal development, growth, things which I guess allow them to establish themselves in the world. And then from that last block, 60 to 90, generally people's values are around remaining connected to a community. So relationships, people, family, and community itself. So those broader 15 will shift. Top 5, I think, is really good to have a core understanding of.
I like it. So, Jake, the fourth S in your model is, and I'll get this right this time, stand alongside.
Yes.
I remember I think we talked about this in the previous episode, but let's go into a wee bit more detail around it, because remember you talked about the US Forest Service. I think that was the story that you gave, and it's also in the book. So talk to people about that, because I think it's a real good a thing to be thinking about along in your mindset.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to frame it, right? So a few years back, I worked with the United States Forest Service, presented to their teams and developed some wellbeing strategies for some of their staff. And when I presented to their teams, these are tough people, right? They work out. It's effectively the US government's equivalent of DOC, the Department of Conservation. They do all the same sort of stuff as DOC. But because the US is just one, so massive and vast, and two, because it's also inhibited with bears and mountain lions and wolves and a whole bunch of other far less friendly things than we have here. If anything, their job is probably a bit tougher than DOC, right? They spend a hell of a lot of time in the absolute middle of nowhere by themselves or with one other person. And a big part of their job really is just to survive whilst they're doing all of this, work on trails and tracks and setting pest traps and all of these things. Yeah. So they're pretty tough. Anyway, after I presented to their team, one of the guys came up to me and what he said was, in the United States Forest Service, we have 2 rules to ensure we don't die out there in the bush. The first one is we don't climb mountains alone. And the second rule is we don't go out unprepared. Wow. And so, that second point, not going out unprepared, sure, that's pretty much what we're talking about today, right? Having some skills and tools and strategies. On that first point, far more interestingly, not climbing mountains alone. Yeah. I think that, if you take climbing mountains as a pretty cheesy, pretty obvious metaphor for going through tough times in life, the research definitely shows that people who go through tough times by themselves, people who climb mountains alone, have really, really bad outcomes. People struggle, people battle, people suffer when they have to go through tough times by themselves. It's incredibly important that we have a sense of belonging, a sense of community, a sense of safety, a sense of someone having our back as we go through life's ups and downs. And I guess the fourth and final, we're standing alongside. That's really what it's about.
How good. Because, when you think about it, my nan always used to say a problem shared is a problem halved. And now having people on your side, standing, with you is definitely a better way to go through life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But it's a thing you've got to, particularly as an adult, right, you've actually got to consciously invest time and effort and energy into creating these opportunities as well. As a young person, a lot of this is sort of ready-made for you, whether it's, sports teams you get put into or cultural and arts pursuits that you do, or you spend your whole day at school with your mates, or all of these different things, which are sort of deliberately constructed around you to create the sense of belonging and safety. But as you move out into the world as an adult, no one else is doing it for you.
No.
Like you've actually got to go to the pub quiz with your mates.
Yeah.
You've actually got to go and play some social sport. You've actually got to, find a partner and build a family. You've actually got to create places where you are safe because no one else is going to do it for you. No. And you need to start doing that and investing the time and effort and energy into doing that before things go wrong. Because once things have gone wrong, it's a bit too late.
Yeah.
You can't be trying to find people to lean on at that point. It's already too late.
No. And I think it's important, like even the advice that Will Jordan's in the book, right? And he's obviously a good mate of yours, but his advice that he would give him younger self was to get involved in more opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think it's really applicable because we tell kids, get involved in opportunities, take opportunities. And it was great to see my son playing football. They had a friendly game against the other team, and then they decided to have a penalty shootout, and they're all standing. When you were saying that, I thought about that. But as we get older, you've also got to go and take opportunities.
Absolutely.
You've actually got to take your own advice sometimes and go step outside to those comfort zones to take some opportunities.
Definitely.
Yeah, they're very cool. I think for me, like that one, you should be the leader in your life, and you should try and be the leader. Not try. I hate that word try. You should consciously want to be the leader for your friends in that environment too. If you can, get alongside them. And I think that's what, being a real good human in today is, actually put yourself out there to go and have a coffee with someone, to invite them to other things, because it's, you could be the voice that they just need to hear that day, right? And I think that's really, really important. Lucas, who's the young guy behind the video, has just asked a really good question around values and how to identify what's most. You've got a great exercise in this book, and we don't have the time to go through it today, but I think it's a really, you've got you've actually got 154 values that people can choose in here. I know we're having a bit of a laugh about that as far as, but really I think, this is an exercise that people should go through, right?
Absolutely.
And go and find some values for yourself.
Better understand what it is that drives and motivates you.
Yeah. And so chapter 7, get amongst it, and you'll be better for it. Let's talk about this. So as we look to wrap this up, self-care, help yourself to be more resilient. I think this is really important. Like, talk to me about that, and let's talk about some things that people can do.
It's very important, and it's also, yet at the same time, it's the smallest chapter, and it's stuck. It begins at page 227, so it's jammed right at the back of the book. It's sort of it's snuck into the back between the back cover and the last sort of main chapter in there. And I guess the reason it sits there is because when I wrote this book, with an understanding of the fact that it would largely be engaged for a teenage market or engaged with by a teenage market. When you're in that age and stage of life, you don't want to be told to do all of the things which I've written in that book.
Exercise.
Exactly. Like exercise, like eating healthy, like getting enough sleep, not drinking too much. I mean, God, we don't want to hear it at any stage of life, but when you're a teenager and you're getting battered around the head with this information by your mum and your health teacher and now me as well, it's a little bit much, right? And as I say in the book, and as I'm completely upfront about, I was never any good with any of those things as a teenager. I was actually really bad with all of those things. So when I talk about it, when I write about it, when I provide that information, I'm certainly not up on my high horse when I do it, because I recognize the fact that I didn't do any of it well. But I guess I also recognize the fact that I do almost all of those considerably better now. And I feel a hell of a lot better as a result of it. And then I think the other thing which I've hopefully communicated through that book is that just how closely linked these things actually are to one's mental health. I think, as a young person growing up, I knew that, drinking too much wasn't good for you. I knew that, not exercising wasn't good for you, or eating bad food wasn't good for you. I didn't really know what not good for you meant. And whether that was kind of a little bit vague or ethereal or what. But the information in there, I hope, is a pretty solid, concrete, realistic representation of the facts. And as I say, hopefully I can bring that information to the table for people from the position of someone who didn't do any of it particularly well, in the hopes that maybe they can do it slightly better than I did. Well, and they don't have to be perfect. No one has to be perfect with it.
But the cool thing is the information's here, right? And you actually talk it, especially about alcohol, and I thought there's some really good things around what was said in here about, hey, how people's brains form, right? And how young people's brains form.
Yeah.
And I think any parent would want to read that, right? And whether like, you know, I think, you know, some people might go, oh, yeah, well, he didn't do it, so why should I? But someone will read this and go, I didn't know that information.
Yeah.
I'm now going to make a better decision. And I think that's what you have provided here. Because I didn't know some of this information.
No, it's funny, eh? Because I'm sure I would have been hearing this somewhere from someone. I'm not sure it wasn't going in or whether I was willfully sort of deliberately ignoring it or what. But hopefully for people it sort of provides a...
Yeah.
And for our young people, as I say, who are probably sick of hearing it from, I guess, from older people in their lives, whether it's parents or teachers or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Hopefully it provides it from, someone who's been through this relatively recently and who has a realistic appraisal of maybe how challenging and difficult it is to battle with some of these struggles.
Yeah. I think also, like, there's been a research round today. On this
there
stuff
is.
too, right?
Yeah,
so
there is.
You've nailed it in some of these areas. Hey, so I've got the last part, and I just wanted to get your take on it. There was a fifth S. Stand your ground.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that, because I haven't got this far on the book.
Yeah.
So I've still got to talk it.
Yeah.
Stand your ground.
Yeah,
So
cool.
Talk to me about it.
Yeah, sweet. So I guess standing your ground is, I guess at its core, it's about the fact that, the first four S's are practical skills and tools and strategies that we can utilize and which we can lean into and which we can employ during periods of challenge and adversity to get through more effectively. I think this idea of standing your ground is sort of wrapping that all up in the big bow of the fact that the reality is, at the end of the day, a big part of your ability to manage life's challenges and ups and downs and adversity is, I guess for want of a better term, having a little bit of fight in you, right? There's going to be, you're going to need this ability to push back and to try and endure through these things, regardless of whether you've got the skills or tools or strategies or not. It's incredibly important for you to just do what you can to, I guess, outlast and to continue to put down that fight. And stand your ground's wrapping that up, I suppose.
So you're saying, you know, this the outro, the stand your ground is the favorite part of you, one of the favorite parts of your book?
Yeah, I think that's my favorite part.
I'll read
I think
it.
You know, it's almost as though you could capture and garner a lot of the information of the first, 250 pages of the book by reading the last 10. I think, I think it wraps it up quite well.
So when you think about, you know, when someone, well, who should buy this book? Who should read this book?
It's funny. I mean, the book was, to be completely upfront, the book was written for teenagers. At the end of the day, it's a book for teenagers.
Yeah.
And the thing which has been most surprising over the past, 2 months of it having been out is that the people who have been loving it the most have not been teenagers.
Yeah.
One of my favorite reviews that I read recently was someone who said, I'm 3 times the age of the author. I'm 27, so we're doing 81 here. I'm 3 times the age of the author. And this book has taught me so much, or I've learned so much from reading this book, which is incredibly humbling, first and foremost. But I think, a lot of people that I've spoken to, a lot of the reviewers for different organizations that have read it, obviously they're not teenagers. And the first thing they say is that, it's a book clearly written for young people, and yet for them it has provided so much understanding, knowledge, and I guess helped them to understand a little bit better resilience and how they can get through life's challenges as well. It's taught them things which they hadn't figured out, and even things which they did sort of know or were familiar to them. It's helped them to frame it in a different way and think about it slightly differently. It's put words to things which they might have already been doing. So
that's nice.
I think the book's for everyone. I really do.
What's the gift that writing this book has given you?
It's been, the gift is that it's done. and I don't mean that in a bad kind of way. I guess for me, it's a dream come true. Yeah. For me, it feels a lot like this is, for me, in all honesty, this book is the beginning of the end of this chapter of life for me. Cool. I've accomplished and achieved everything which I wanted to within the space now. Yeah. That is, 10 years worth of work, or the product of 10 years worth of work, which I've been, heading towards for the last sort of 4 or 5 years on this project. Yeah. It's a culmination of everything which I've learned and seen and done throughout that time. And for me, the gift of this book is the opportunity to have that information out there in the world. And I feel really proud and satisfied of that. Yeah. And the gift is that now that it's done, now that it's out there into the world, now that I've sort of done everything I wanted to do in this space, I can go and do something else. Yeah, you can go and create something else, right? Yeah. Create another story, create another. Well, hey, look, you should be hugely proud of this book. Jake, thank you for coming in. Where can people buy this book? Hopefully everywhere. Go have a look down at your local bookstore. Should be on the shelves at most bookshops. Otherwise, have a look online and you'll find copies there.
What I loved when I was at your book launch and you obviously had your family there and stuff, and I think I bought 3 or 4 copies at the time, and you made a great statement to your family members. Look, you don't have to buy my book to make me money, but you do have to buy my book to make me famous. And I was like, that is great. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that one day when my book comes out. I'm going to go, look, you don't have to buy my book to be famous.
I'm not trying to profiteer off my loved ones, but I do want the book to hit number 1. I mean, I'm not going to. I can't lie about that for entirely selfish reasons. So we
need Paul Wright to buy more for his whole Harcourts.
We'll have to chat about that.
Global group.
This time, Paul, I'm not going to individually write in them and post them all off, because that was a big top one last time.
Hey, but if you're in Scorpio Books in Christchurch, head down. They've got your book there.
Yeah.
I know they have your book there. So
I've been dropping into a few places and doing and signing copies in there as well. So if you bounce around a few different shops in Christchurch, there's a good chance you'll get your hands on a signed copy. Otherwise, give me a yell, and I'm more than happy to catch up for a coffee and put a scribble in it for you.
Yeah, and also, obviously, you're doing keynote speaking these days. Where can people get hold of you?
Easiest way to get in touch is my website, jakebailey.co.nz. Plenty of information through there and a way to reach out and get in contact with me.
Awesome. All right. Hey, really thank you for listening to the Marketing for Business podcast. Look, we didn't talk much marketing today, but I think this is a bigger topic. So the comeback code, resilience is really, really important. So go and buy the book. Better still, go and buy 2 and give one away to a friend. And especially if they've got teenagers, etc., maybe buy 2 as well. People should read this book. People should start doing, even if you do the exercise chapter 7 and actually have some values that you've got of your own. So, man, super proud of you, man. Well done on creating this book. And your job now is to share this episode, share it out. Tag Jake in on it. Tag Jake if you've gone and buy one of his books too. Tag him and make him famous, because then he'll be able to sell more books, and one day he might even get rich from it. So, all right. Till then, have fun, take care, and as always, celebrate your victories.